Buy my novel, Escape from the Village, from major booksellers online. Go to escapevillage.com. Subscribe to my Substack. Go to fountainheadforum.substack.com. Thank you. Welcome to the party, pal. This is Fountainhead Forum 119. I have Jack Mason on. He also goes by Jack the Perfume Nationalist. We're going to talk about Ayn Rand, culture, art, and wherever this conversation takes us. How are you, Jack?
I'm doing great.
Hey, Jack. So tell me, how did you get into Ayn Rand?
So I initially read The Fountainhead in probably 2011, 2012. I was curious because of the universal contempt for Ayn Rand that was forming at that time, kind of adjoined to the hatred of the Tea Party and that libertarian moment. So I wanted to see for myself what was in the book, and I was quite amazed to find it to be this like incredibly stylish and satirically funny Art Deco melodrama that is not appreciated in the ways that it should be, because it's such an incredibly cool thing, and it's kind of reduced to dry libertarian politics and discussions of atheism and just like kind of prefab salty little packet of negative things people say about Ayn Rand. That was right around when I was getting red pilled and becoming aware of the evils of the fake news media. So I found the satire of the media in it and the art world and the villain Ellsworth Toohey to be incredibly prophetic. I read Atlas Shrugged for my show finally this year, and it's much the same thing but expanded. And I think to really absorb Ayn Rand's viewpoint, you should read them Fountainhead first and Atlas Shrugged. I think they give you a really necessary ideological overview of how difficult it is to stand out as an ambitious or talented person who actually wants to improve the world or advance humanity or create something. I think the most valuable thing in those books is how it gives you this overview of the sinister octopus of communist villainy, okay? Where the whole, there's just this kind of like spiritual battle going on when anyone senses that Howard Rourke is disobedient or independent. There's just this kind of like spiritual sense of negativity about him, which is deliberately driven forward by Ellsworth Toohey and the media. And it's all about how the villainous people want to drag down humanity to a level of mediocrity that they can control.
That's a very good way of looking at it. What did I assume what you believed, you found out all the things the left had said about Ayn Rand wasn't true, right? Or do you think it was just inaccurate, or do you think it was purposely true, or just were they being purposely, were they lying, or were they just ignorant?
Both. They're lying, they're ignorant. Most people that repeat these typical Ayn Rand criticisms, such as that she's a bad writer, which is absurd. They have not read her firsthand because they're too scared to. And since those books came out, there has been this negativity from the left about her, which has not changed. And it triggers people in such a way, such an intense way, because once you read the books, it's very like, you can't deny that what's being depicted is true. It's a really disturbing kind of ideological shift that you go through when reading it, because you can either just block it all out and pretend that it's bad writing, or you can listen to what she's saying. And she just had this incredibly prophetic mind that, you know, at the time that she was writing those, things were so good in America and people had such freedom, and everything that she was writing about didn't come to a head until like the last 10 years. And we're really like seeing the world of Atlas Shrugged, where there's just this general incompetence across industry and politics because of years of leftist ideology, which rewards mediocrity.
Yeah, yeah, it is interesting. I mean, yeah, she really, but I think also she had it had been, where she'd come from. It's unfortunate too because I've noticed that there is that people who started with the Fountainhead do have a different perspective than people who have started without Atlas Shrugged.
Right.
And it seems like more and more are starting with Atlas Shrugged now, which is unfortunate. But
no, they should read Fountainhead first.
Yeah.
Because like you have to kind of have the foundation of being able to spot the, sinister unnamed black cloud of the Ellsworth Toohey people before you can carry that to Atlas Shrugged and see this extended to that dystopian future vision of what that ideology causes in society.
And I think out of all the, I don't know about you, but it seems like great story. Having a good villain is more important than having a good hero.
Right.
And I think Toohey is probably the best villain of all the villains.
He is.
He's real. He's well done. He's real, and you really sense what is on his mind. It seems like the villains in Atlas Shrugged are a little more caricatures, and it's usually also it seems like there's a lot of the most popular stories usually just have one big villain. So all that is in one person. I don't know. Maybe that's just a way to. Maybe they just don't want to. The villain seems more. Maybe it's just better to have the instead of the villain being a group, it's just one villain.
Well, you see through in Ellsworth Toohey how the villain mastermind uses the media to influence public opinion in these really brilliant, small, invisible ways. It's all about his curation of this architecture column and how he, at different points, gives Howard Rourke these like scathing reviews, ignores Howard Rourke, and completely shuts out any discussion of him. Gets his degenerate bohemian friends in the art world to join in. It's a totally realistic depiction of a type of person that exists that we see every day. So when people try to claim that Ayn Rand villains are caricatures because they are like uniformly evil, or that's a bad thing, this is silly. People just aren't accustomed to the kind of plain speaking and direct depiction of good and evil, direct mythical depiction of good and evil that you see in Ayn Rand. I see the world like that, so it really resonated with me. I see a plainly evil, conniving person with some like illness of the spirit in them. And the type of things that they're going to support, the type of perspectives they're going to have. It informs everything.
Yeah, it definitely does. And there's definitely, and really, in a way, we're kind of, in a way, Ayn Rand has gotten the Ellsworth Toohey treatment from the so-called literary establishment, and I don't know if I'm the only one, but I remember thinking, I first noticed Ayn Rand's name probably when I was 18 or 19, and I saw her name in various libertarian book catalogs, and then there was this little voice inside him. I said, well, if the so-called literary experts hate her this much, she's probably pretty good, because this was after being told in high school that Hemingway was great literature and that F. Scott Fitzgerald was great literature and all this other crap. So I said, well, maybe we ought to give this a try if they hate her. And I said, okay, this is actually, there's actually something here. Although I will admit, I first started with Capitalism, the Unknown Ideal, and then went on to the New Left. What do you have to say about Gail Winan and Peter Keating, though?
Peter Keating is the kind of less talented, more compliant, more like useful pawn of the system. Just someone who's weak and will stand for nothing. Gail Winan, I'm struggling to remember what Gail Winan's big thing was. He's kind of in the sort of three-way with him and Dominique, with Rourke and Dominique, right? So that's more of the kind of like salacious romance part of the book. But Winan is supporting Rourke, right?
Well, Winan's the newspaper guy,
He's the new. Okay, yeah, it's Keating is definitely someone that that's resentful of Rourke's independence and talent and how he can't be intimidated.
Yeah, there's always and that definitely is something you'll see too. Or sometimes the people who are great are most resented by the people who are the very good. Because they realize that maybe it's just because they're just coming up short. But yeah, it's so wild with that. And what do you got to say about Dominique?
Dominique is amazing. That's one of the original criticisms of the book, was people being immediately mad about the eroticized rape scene. Dominique just seems to be Ayn Rand's idealized, iconic vision of herself, and people really hate genuinely horny women who are horny in the way that men are horny, and Ayn Rand is one of those, where all of these books are just a testament to her incredible sexual appetite for men, and people find that really strange and off-putting. But what you said about sensing that there might be something there when something is universally critically reviled, that's a really valuable tool, because especially with modern movie criticism, anything that basically any standard like art horror A24 type thing will automatically get like 80% approval and good reviews. Anything that causes emotional negativity from current critics, there's usually something good there. Like Blonde, the Marilyn Monroe movie last year, caused this massive Ayn Rand style triggering among critics, just because it was first of all, it was anti-abortion, extremely intense and emotional in a way that movies are not today. But as soon as I saw this kind of like unified critical distaste for that, I knew that there was something there.
That's got to make me ask, did you ever read Ayn Rand's article about Marilyn Monroe?
No.
Oh, she wrote it right after Marilyn Monroe died. It was when I try to introduce people to Ayn Rand, I usually say, read this article. It's called "Through Your Most Grievous Fault," and it's Ayn Rand was a big fan of Marilyn Monroe.
Yeah, no, I am not familiar with that. It's hard to get people into Ayn Rand because, well, first of all, there's that just extremely strong social consequence kind of negativity that they've received, where they're scared to read her because they know that there are negative consequences to it if they like her. It's because it's so deeply ingrained, but also because it just takes so much time. So you really have to go through the Fountainhead, all 700 pages, in order to absorb that vision. And I'm always trying to get people to read it when they're stuck on these way less consequential little slim self-published modern volumes. I'm like, this woman already spelled it out 75 years ago what you're thinking, already mapped all of this out for you, and there it is. But it takes time, and people don't read fiction anymore.
Yeah, they don't read that. They don't read as much of it as they used to. I mean, they're still like, I'll wait for the movie, which I don't think that, and I don't think the movies really do it justice. I had Jacob Hornberger on here, and then I said to him, I said, "You're the first person I know who first got introduced to Ayn Rand by the Fountainhead movie." But
the movie is fantastic, but it's something that I gather that the official like Ayn Rand Institute, like libertarian, like nerd type people have a distaste for, as nerds always have a distaste for movie adaptations of books. But it's a miracle that movie exists, and it perfectly visualizes the Art Deco psychedelic craziness of it, but it doesn't make much sense unless you've already read the book.
It's hard to, the only times I've read books and seen the movies, I did read The Hunger Games, which is, I think, I actually think Katniss Everdeen is very much like a Randian hero.
I never read Hunger Games. I saw like 2 of the movies.
Yeah.
But honestly, what I remember when I saw that first movie was being kind of intimidated and impressed by how kind of violent and brutal it was, which sounds silly now because it's so like saturated in culture, but
yeah,
I was kind of impressed by it.
Well, this is where I don't think the movies necessarily did the novels justice. The novels are actually written in first person present tense, which is kind of odd, but so it's always from her perspective, and she's always always in present tense. But because it's a first person narrative, you really get into all the moral dilemmas that Katniss has, and she has a lot of moral dilemmas.
Yeah,
which the movies just kind of gloss over those moral dilemmas. And I think also the books are very much a pro-capitalist movie. There's this entire black market that's where people use to survive. I mean, Katniss is doing all this out of and there's the Hob and all these other things where people go trade. And the other thing, and what I think is really amazing about the Hunger Games is it's actually very much a Randian hero, but also a hero who really cares about her family.
Right.
And one thing you get, and one thing also that you really get from the books is you really get this feeling from the books that really everything she does is kind of a tribute to her father who's dead. And she's doing all of this to honor her dad's memory and keep her dad's memory alive. And there's one scene where after and we're giving away the scenes here, but after the district is destroyed, she goes back, for things. And one thing she goes back, she said, "I wanted to make sure I got my father's hunting jacket." It's just things like that. And who doesn't keep some old piece of clothing around because it belonged to one of their parents? I mean, I know I do.
Right. My favorite trickle down.
It doesn't have any value to anybody, but it has value to you because of what it represents. It's so
my favorite trickle down of Hunger Games aesthetics was the Joe Biden's stolen election inauguration, where there was like no audience and Lady Gaga was dressed like Hunger Games singing God Bless America, and everyone was wearing masks. That's all I have to say about Hunger Games. I don't think about it that much.
Yes, of course. Lady Gaga. Jack, this is something else too, though. We talked about the Fountainhead. So what, and Dominique, this is interesting. This genuine horniness that women have. What do you think about, say Dagny in Atlas Shrugged, or some of the characters in Atlas Shrugged?
She's the same thing as Dominique. A lot more, a lot more kind of likable and honorable. Like Dominique is a more shadowy, weird, the sadomasochistic character. But Dagny is, again, Ayn Rand's idealized version of herself. And another kind of point that I always make about Ayn Rand is that you have this brilliant woman writing million-selling books that are still popular and still read today, who is totally excluded from the overbearing great women writers narratives, just as all politically disobedient women artists are. I mean, Margaret Mitchell with Gone with the Wind is also never mentioned in reviews of great women artists. Camille Paglia, like the whole idea of those kind of lists of women who have done great things is just such a sham, because you have women who wrote some of the greatest books that have ever existed totally excluded due to small-brained myopic politics.
That's a good point. I didn't think about Margaret Mitchell, but I've certainly Margaret Mitchell is extremely popular.
Yeah, unfortunately, no one thinks about Margaret Mitchell because, like the critical negativity about Ayn Rand, everybody has this kind of idea that Gone with the Wind is some sort of reductive racist soap opera, when it's also a brilliant satire of a brilliant, cruel 30s satire of women. It's just nothing like what its critical reputation today would lead you to believe, because Margaret Mitchell was this like brilliant, like 30s flapper type witty personality. And leftists and academics have been mad about Gone with the Wind since the beginning and trying to reduce its power, but they can never take it away. It will always stand as the biggest, greatest achievement of the golden age of Hollywood, and it will always be my favorite book. And it's an extremely edifying, red-pilling book too, because paired with the 30s flapper satire of women is basically her adaptation of Birth of a Nation and like Thomas Dixon, The Klansman. And so, it's politically inconvenient for everyone, but it has such power that everyone loves it still the second they see it. I mean, it's just indomitable.
Yeah, there's definitely something to be and I think it still might. I think it's still one of the, if you go, if you divide, the gross by the price of what people paid for a movie ticket, I think it's still maybe the most popular movie ever made.
With inflation,
with inflation, all that stuff.
If not still the highest earning movie, it's up there still in like the top 5.
Because this was a time when maybe you paid, you might have paid 50 cents to get into a movie or something.
And Gone with the Wind tickets would have been more expensive because it was like a big road show production. So
it was tickets. It was I think it was also one of the most expensive movies ever made too. So that was
the making of it, it's such a smooth, streamlined product because it's from that era when the studios had total control and were able to just had this well-functioning assembly line. It was before the disintegration of the studio system, when actors started to believe that they were all auteur geniuses who didn't want to be in their contracts or whatever. But like the making of Gone with the Wind was really messy, and it had 3 directors, and it's just it was thought that it was going to be a failure, much like Titanic later they thought it was going to be a failure. So it's just incredible that such a perfectly sculpted work came out of that chaos.
It is interesting how sometimes perfection comes out of chaos that way. And for people who don't know, this was a time when a lot of actors would sign a contract to a studio, and you might be contracted to the studio for 10 years, and you would just do whatever movies they told you to do during that contract, and then
which
that was,
for
as they
which
call it, the studio
the
system.
actors liked. I mean, there's been decades of this kind of false narrative that the studio, I mean, people have this like hatred of Hollywood. Okay, they have this kind of idea that Hollywood is just always so evil, and it's really silly. And there's been this narrative that actors were always like exploited and all of this, but it's totally untrue, because the actors were protected. They were given reliable work. The studio was run like a college campus, basically. Like, they had so much fun. They didn't have to worry about their public image. They were protected and insulated. They could, be gay, and the studio would cover for them. It didn't matter also if a movie was a bomb or was successful, because there would always be more of them. It was a great time to be an actor. And also, there's like dumb modern bug-brained feminist narratives that like, oh, women have never had any power until today. But those top earning actresses in Hollywood at that time, in the 20s, 30s, 40s, they were the most powerful women in the United States. Some of the most powerful women in the world. They had so much influence, and they made so much money. It's just insane the way that this is all reduced to, oh, like Betty Davis was mad about her contract or something, Are you there?
Yeah, I'm here.
Mm-hmm.
Betty Davis was mad about her contract, you said. Then what?
Oh, yeah. Just, that's like Betty Davis was one of the first ones who made it known that she hated the old studio contract system, because everyone, thought of themselves as a great artist that didn't have to answer to anyone. But yeah, the feminist narratives about old Hollywood are incorrect.
Well, it was like what Hattie McDaniel once said, says, I can make more money playing a maid than I can being a maid.
Yeah, and give an incredible, iconic, hilarious performance and be the first Black actor to win an Oscar. But now they're always like, she had to attend a separate, a segregated awards screening, and they bring up all of this nonsense. Gone with the Wind was controversial right from the start, though. Like, the controversy didn't come later. It was controversial on all sides. I remember a few years ago at UT, there was like a Gone with the Wind exhibit, and they had all these various letters from different organizations that were mad about how the novel had been changed when they adapted it to the movie. And there was this like letterhead from the Ku Klux Klan where they were mad about how the presence of the Klan, which is explicit in the book, in the second half of the book, had been reduced. And it had this like insane, like Art Nouveau, like fairy tale looking letterhead of like hooded Klansmen on it.
Yeah. Yeah, and I remember there's this line too where Red Butler says to Mammy, something like, said, "You're a woman whose respect I want to earn." It's like because she seemed to be, sometimes she was portrayed as the smartest person in the whole movie, because she seemed to know, she had all this wisdom, like the wise old grandmother who just is dispensing wisdom and usually ends up and has these intuitions about people, and she's always right. It's
well, the problem that critics have with it is that she's a character who was loyal to the family and stayed with the family, whereas the only politically acceptable Civil War narrative is that everyone, all slaves, wanted freedom and like had total contempt for the families that they worked for. And it's not true, but it's that makes people so mad, is that she's a member of the family, essentially.
Yeah. That so that you mentioned Atlas Shrugged, and Dagny. What do you think about the villains or the other characters in Atlas Shrugged? Like, I think Reardon is a very well done character in Atlas Shrugged, and certainly Francisco. Although,
It's such a blur because I read it so quickly. Okay,
yeah,
the Reardon is
the steel man, the steel mill, the steel man, the steel entrepreneur, and Francisco
wait,
is
it's remind me, is Reardon one of the villainous? Who's that like
Reardon.
schlubby husband?
Reardon creates Reardon Metal. He's married to Lillian Reardon. He is kind of
Okay, yeah, and he has the villainous wife, and
he has
he's
the
the one that
wife. Yeah,
Dagny has the affair with.
yeah.
Yeah, I mean, great character. I love the scheming of Lillian Reardon, that villainous wife who's always like going behind the scenes to sabotage him.
In a way, I think Reardon kind of exemplifies some of these billionaires that we have today who go out and make all this money and do all this good stuff and create things and maybe do create value, but then they're completely but then they're completely giving way to the stupid bullshit.
Yeah, yeah, because I mean, I'm sympathetic to it because like, what else can you do? Because they always have to answer to some like sinister board, you know, or
Yeah,
and they'll get like ousted from their own company by the board.
yes,
And we saw like the ludicrous just like criminal things that happened and continue to happen because of Me Too, where
yeah,
every man who is remotely accused of anything during this witch panic gets ousted from their
yeah.
own company and loses their own creations, and it's just deeply evil and wrong.
And yeah, and they don't, and nothing has to be proven. I mean, the accusations,
No.
and there are no consequences for the accusations. Although in some cases too, it ends up being the result of money from the men. Like Mackenzie Bezos got that money in her divorce, and now she's apparently putting money into all these communist causes, and I guess also the widow of Steve Jobs is doing the same thing.
Yeah, that's a really negative thing about these billionaire the type of billionaires who marry that type of woman who takes all the money and contributes it to communism. I mean, like men must go their own way. There must be a prenup now. Like society is just so stacked against men in every way right now.
Yeah, well, it wasn't a divorce in the case of Jobs. It was yeah, they were married. They were married in '91 and still married. So it just happened that way.
I don't know anything about Steve Jobs.
Yeah, yeah. Other than Apple, yeah, it's a very interesting to see all this happening though. And I don't know what to say about their siblings. There's the cousins. Did you ever read We the Living?
No, I've only read Fountainhead and Atlas.
We the Living was also made into a movie that was Italian, and it's actually pretty well done, and also very very true to the book. Uh,
Yeah, I've heard this from my friend Alec.
it's actually longer than the Fountainhead movie, even though the book's actually shorter. So that's
Uh-huh. Yeah, I'll
and
have to
and
check
the
it out
funny
at some
story
point.
also is that it was also it was also supposed to be an anti-communist movie, but made by the Italian fascists. But then somebody realized, no, this is an anti-state movie. So, but it
Right.
got made anyway. That's interesting. The golden age of Hollywood. You know, what else what else do you think is also a case of some cases of politically incorrect movies or politically incorrect art that got pigeonholed for whatever reason?
I mean, the last 10 years of wokeness, or whatever you want to call this sinister spidery ideology, which has swept through and hypnotized and destroyed the West. I mean, it's all about going through the past with a red pen and censoring and making things unavailable, which are perceived as politically inconvenient. And this was a fear that I had right at the beginning of the advent of streaming. And I'm always telling people, if they care about a movie or a book, to own physical media of it. And it seems that nobody I used to get called crazy for this, but now I see a lot of posts and stuff where people are finally saying this, because things like Roseanne, and then the post George Floyd, when they went through and just removed in a very silly way any episode of a show that had blackface in it. Like streaming was this great promise of this vast library of content at the beginning, and like Netflix streaming originally was so different. It had like all these like art movies like Enter the Void and Nymphomaniac and Antichrist and stuff, and then a bunch of like old Hollywood movies. They quickly realized people didn't want that, and now you have this big wash of just like inane Netflix produced woke content that never even gets released on DVD, and which the streaming services will just delete in order to free up space. So it just goes into this netherworld. But yeah, if you care about a particular movie or book, get multiple physical copies of it, because you never know when it's going to be made unavailable for sale because of some breach of terms of service.
Or, I would also say, still, use a real computer and, install all the Kindle apps and all that stuff on your real computer, and then back up your books to another location on your computer.
Right.
Where Amazon can't get to them. I mean, it's rather insidious. And, Jack, in a way, it's kind of sad, because we've never gotten to a time where it's been easier to save all of this stuff. And yet, there's more of a desire to delete it. I mean, you can look at Hollywood. I mean, most of the movies made before World War II are gone, not because they were politically incorrect, but just because it was difficult to keep all these movies.
Things just disappear now.
It's
not always political reasons at all.
Yeah, but I mean, you had cases where nitrate film stock could easily catch on fire. Not to mention it just took a lot of space to store all this stuff. You had films. You can put all this stuff onto a laptop now. And before it might be a whole, you could put a whole warehouse of film reels onto a laptop now. That's my point.
I mean, the other factor is that people just simply don't care. I mean, there was this in the 2000s, during like the heyday of DVD releases, when all of these deluxe DVDs were coming out, loaded with special features and commentaries and stuff. There was a kind of real broad archival appreciation of cinema that has completely gone away. I mean, people just don't watch any movies from before the 70s anymore.
Yeah. Well, and I don't know if you're a fan, but if you're ever among Doctor Who fans, they'll talk about, the lost episodes of Doctor Who.
Oh, well, I've never watched Doctor Who, but I'm really into soap operas. And soap operas up through the mid 70s, they would just delete episodes on the tapes and record over them.
They would just use the tapes over and over again, the same way we'd use use a VCR tape at home over and over again.
Mm-hmm.
Exactly. Yeah, there's a lot of Jack, it's kind of funny too. I have this nostalgic feeling for old game shows, and it's exactly the same thing. These old game shows, that are just lost, and usually, and it's kind of a funny thing. there seems to also be a lot of finger pointing. Was the producer supposed to keep the game show, or was the network supposed to be the game show? Whose fault is it that this game show is missing? And it
Right.
the only pattern I've noticed is it seems like CBS was better at game show preservation, and Mark Goodson was better at game show preservation. But it's a real roll of the dice after that. And even also, and Johnny Carson, he was mad when he found out that a bunch of his episodes were lost. He was so mad.
Right.
Yeah.
They would do stuff like that all the time in the early days of TV, like Jim and Tammy Faye Baker. They were like pioneers of Christian television, and they went around and made successful shows and made the careers of all these different pastors who they had like antagonistic falling outs with. Those guys would, after Jim and Tammy left, just like delete all of their episodes, like literally throw the tapes away so that they, out of jealousy, so that they wouldn't be broadcast again.
But a lot of times too, it was just the fact that there was no easy way to keep this stuff. I mean, if you think about just how much, think just about how much space you would save if you went from all VHSs to all DVDs.
Right.
And nowadays, and the one group I always think of, I can remember, mobile disc jockeys back in the old days when they had to haul around all these CDs and stuff. And now they just carry a laptop and they've got 10,000 songs on a laptop.
Right. And, large uncontainable works of art or media. Like, I'm always trying to gin up interest in daytime soap operas on my show because they just kind of languish in this world of forgotten media. There are only like 4 of them left, and still running in the US. But it's such a beautiful, expansive art form, unlike anything else. But the fact is that it takes over your entire life trying to study them, because it's just like narratives. For instance, Guiding Light started in like 1937 as a radio show and ran for 20 years, and then moved to television and wasn't canceled until 2009, and it's the longest continuous narrative in human history, which is just amazing.
It is amazing. What do you think soap operas tell us about our culture, Jack? I mean, I'm not really much into soaps. Although I did kind of have that, although I think I was actually watching Dallas when I probably wasn't old enough to be watching Dallas when everybody was watching Dallas. And then you had some of those younger soaps like Dawson's Creek or 90210,
my favorite nighttime soap of the 80s is Knots Landing, the Dallas spinoff, which, speaking of lost media, Knots Landing, only the first 2 seasons were ever released on DVD, allegedly because of music rights or something, because of songs that Lisa Hartman sings. The greatest of all of the nighttime soaps is still only viewable on bootleg DVD-Rs that people recorded from SoapNet in 2003. And it's just such a crime that's gone. But in terms of what the soap opera narrative does, that's different from, say, a 90-minute movie, the way that it becomes this complex, decades-spanning sort of communal narrative where women who watch it have decades of knowledge about these characters and their relationships, and it's like, this reading some kind of complex math problem when someone tries to explain 30 years of plot of what's been happening. But the slow pace, intended to be viewed intermittently or with like half attention, I think just invades your mind in this rich, amazing way that like fast-paced, plot-oriented media does not. And I also think a lot of the eccentricities of the format, such as recasting characters with different actors, and bringing people back to life, I think that stuff like that that's made fun of actually does sometimes show this deeper understanding of character. Like, people can completely transform and just seem like a different person from one day to the next. Soaps were also, in terms of censorship, while nighttime television was way less tawdry and way less explicit because it was like considered family viewing hours, daytime was always at the forefront of being scandalous and sexually explicit, and had this really lurid pornographic aura to it. Like, I watch old episodes with the commercials back when commercials were sexy, before commercials were what they are today, where it's just like reversed roles and like men doing laundry and stuff like this. But yeah, you would have these incredible, complex, weird, incestuous, gothic narratives going on, and then you have these sexy commercials where a hot guy comes on and tells you about how Crisco is good for your stomach, and like men using a bunch of like firemen using bar soap, and it was this whole like just hours long block of sexy pornographic content for women to consume. And like the format itself, like at the peak of soap's popularity in like the 70s and 80s, like some of them, like Another World, expanded to broadcasting 90-minute episodes 5 days a week, which is completely nuts. Like, imagine being expected to watch a feature-length episode of something every single day, and it just like tromps on.
But one thing you're saying about the slow pace, you're basically saying that it was kind of designed that you could watch it while you do the laundry or watch it while you iron clothes. Is that fair to say?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah,
and I think that I like stuff like that. Like, I have always resonated more strongly with that kind of media than with some like fast-paced, like really plot-heavy thing.
Yes, and of course, to our international listeners, this also, the commercials also explain why Americans call them soap operas, is because when they came out, you'd have commercials for things like laundry detergent, Palmolive, Tide, and they would advertise, and so they were selling soap. So that's why we call them soap operas.
Right. And in addition to being so sexual and shocking and sleazy, a lot of them were also Christian in this amazing way. Like Guiding Light was a Christian soap opera.
Yeah.
That was centered in the early radio days around like a pastor who would deliver these sermons. I mean, the early episodes of it, most of which are lost, were like literal just sermons on the radio. And you have that narrative extending continuously without stopping into the 70s and 80s, when they got really, really dark with there's one villainous character named Roger Thorpe, who's like one of the great villains, but had these like wild, like weird rape scenes. This is when General Hospital was doing the same thing. So I love that that uneasy combination of Christian media and this salacious content.
Yeah, it does sound interesting. Yes, that I can imagine what what the soap. I've heard things about the soaps in Latin America. I don't know if you ever watched any of those, but
I've never gotten into that. I mean, as it is, getting into even one of these shows and trying to study it a bunch takes over your entire life.
Oh yeah.
So I have like full hard drives of like Another World and Guiding Light, and I still try to keep up with like Days of Our Lives and Young and the Restless as they come on. But yeah, there's only so a human life is only so long.
Yeah, and there's only so much you can watch, but it, and then they do have a Jack, can you comment on what's often called but it goes to other TV, but as they call it, the soap opera rapid aging syndrome.
Right.
Yeah.
I mean,
Or a kid's born and then,
rapid aging is when a character will have a baby, and then it will get sort of invisibly aged to a toddler, maybe within the year or 2 years. And then usually in about 10 years, they'll be aged into a teenager or an adult. I think, in the broad scope of things, when you're watching these every day, it like happens pretty seamlessly. You just accept it. It's just one of those kind of artificial things that you accept. But at the same time, soap operas have a more realistic depiction of the passage of time than any other medium, because they're so slow and because they last for so many years.
Yeah. I gotta ask Jack, one show that you hear and apparently still survives. Did you ever watch Dark Shadows?
I've watched a bit of it. I have purchased the giant coffin DVD set of like 300 DVDs or whatever, because that's the only because it was only on for like 5 years, and it has an audience of like horror fans rather than just soap fans. That's the only daytime soap that's been released in its entirety on physical media.
It was also apparently more of what would have been considered a teen soap at the time too.
Right.
I know Days of Our Lives also kind of had a teen audience as well.
Right. They would always, I mean, starting in like the 60s, they would kind of rejigger the soaps with younger characters to appeal to younger audiences. But like Days of Our Lives exploded in the 90s when Dr. Marlena Evans got possessed by not just a demon, but Satan for like 2 entire years, which is completely nuts. And it was like really scary when it was coming on, because nobody had done that. Nobody had like broken this rule, that you can just have a character possessed by the devil for a long time, going around murdering people. And that brought in a lot of people. Days of Our Lives also around that time added a bunch of like sexy teen characters, and they would do like big summer plot lines when kids were home from school. But the last new daytime soap, which was Passions, which started in 99 and ran until 2009, was created by the guy who was responsible for the possession plotline in Days of Our Lives. So it was intended to bring in younger viewers, but it was just like completely nuts with like Nazi incest, rape, midget, like what? It was just insane.
Well, and we also might remember that Spike on Buffy the Vampire Slayer was a very big fan of Passions.
Oh yeah. He would talk about that. And speaking of Buffy,
we got to talk about Buffy. Yes,
we should. It's an interesting thing. I loved it when I was a kid. I watched it, in 4th and 5th grade. My mom wasn't too happy about me watching it. But it's so, the Joss Whedon clever self-referential dialogue is so rooted to that particular period that I can't imagine Buffy has aged that well. But I haven't tried to watch it again in like 20 years.
That would be interesting. How some of these things age well, some of them don't, and sometimes I think people just don't really care. But there are because of the vibe. I mean, it's interesting, how Match Game from the 70s is still popular on the Game Show Network, even though so much of that is just it's so dated, but people still watch it because it's fun. But so I'd be curious. But Buffy is also that some ways like a Randian hero, because at least in the first 5 seasons, there was a very clear dividing line of this is good versus evil. And good has to fight evil, and it was never really blurred, and that good people had certain ethics. I mean,
See, I think Buffy was at its peak uh, in seasons 1 and 2, when it was still very high school monster
Yeah.
of the week, kind of tawdry, and it was
Yeah.
shot on that like grainy 16 millimeters. It looked really dark.
Yes, it
And
did.
then the kind of like critically praised era where it got very like arty and sort of like prestige television and full of itself with like 3, 4, and 5. That is less good to me. And then I loved when it went to ghetto ass UPN and season 6 with Buffy having the sadomasochistic sex relationship with Spike and working at the Double Meat Palace, and like lesbian Willow being the villain. I love the trashy vibes of the UPN seasons.
I don't. The Buffy Spike thing never quite worked for me. I just that was so. It kind of ends up killing both characters, the villain, the good guy. And you brought up Double Meat. That is largely considered the worst episode of Buffy the Vampire Slayer.
I love that.
If you talk among fans, they all hate that episode.
See, the
Double Meat Palace. Yeah.
What seems to have aged better on that show, and what looks cooler to me now, is when it was just kind of like cute and less pretentious in the first 2 seasons.
Yeah, that is something interesting I've noticed about the first 2 seasons. It looks like it's just darker.
It was shot on 16 millimeter. It was cheap.
Okay, so that's the difference. They shot on 16 millimeter.
Yeah,
film.
and then it moved to 35 when it got like cinematic, and
Yeah, that I wondered what the difference was. That's so I'm not aware of all those subtle differences, but it did have a certain darkness about it.
I also remember how dramatic it was when Columbine happened in 1999.
Oh yes,
and they like canceled every single episode that had anything to do with violence and teenagers happening.
Well, there was the one episode, Earshot, got delayed, and they didn't air that until September. Columbine happened in April. They didn't air Earshot until September, and then they did, and that was an episode that could kind of stand on its own. So they, it wasn't really that essential to the overall character, the season, the arc of the season. But then the finale for that season didn't get aired until July, and it apparently had gotten aired in Canada already. And this was in '99, so we're at a point where some people had, broadband connections. It definitely got bootlegged, and probably got bootlegged a lot. To people were sharing video, downloading the videos, sharing the videos, and stuff like that. It was.
And Columbine just caused this crazy sweep of panic in Hollywood, where they like did stuff like delay those Buffy episodes, and also like would cancel the releases of movies that had anything to do with teenagers and violence. Like Donnie Darko was like delayed. It's like its theatrical release was canceled because it had some teen violence kind of thing, and then it became like a cult hit on DVD later. But yeah, there was really that like massive panic about any media dealing with teenagers and violence in school.
I've always thought that's art is a mirror. It's not a cause so much. I mean, and I can remember that as a teenager, you just hearing, we always hear rock lyrics would cause, violence. And I would, and the only thing I said, the only thing that rock's lyrics cause is bad grammar. that is one thing I've always made sure in my novel when I wrote it, said, make sure everything is grammatically correct. All my characters use proper grammar, all that stuff. Just, I don't want to model because I do think art should at least give people something to aspire to. And, but other than that, it's just so, it's so,
I mean, I do definitely think that art has palpable consequences on people's behavior. Like there was after Columbine, there was just the general kind of popular viewpoint that it was foolish to attribute any real life violence to video games or music or whatever, but it's clear that that kind of media influences people. And something like, you know, Marilyn Manson was blamed for it, and he did this lame, you know, apology tour and went on the lame Michael Moore Bowling for Columbine documentary, which is the source of so many libtard tropes that we see today. And then everyone was like, "Oh, actually, he's really smart." And he said all these like empty, vacuous little things. But in the mid '90s, Antichrist Superstar, the content of the Manson albums was all of this like Nietzsche, like fascist, like no one else is real but you, kill everyone type of stuff. And so that, especially to someone like mentally ill or like a teenager or whatever, that can influence you. And I've always hated the Grand Theft Auto games. I just because I thought they were like boring and unplayable. But I mean, obviously, like committing crimes for fun in a virtual world when you're a child does psychologically influence you. And the world that we see now, where Gen X has taken over, and these dated Gen X tropes like suburbia is evil and everything horror is good, are just like the most mainstream things on earth, and society is really ugly because of it. Everything is Halloween all the time, everything is horror all the time, everything is suburbia and Christianity are bad all the time, and it's resulted in just low quality, foolish, goofy, meaninglessly violent media.
It's really hard, you know. It's really hard to say where this violent media. How I don't. I was never. I hate the term, but I was never under the impression that Gen X was controlling anything. I mean,
I have a bone to pick with Gen X because all of these tropes about how like gothic misfits are always innocent, and white Christians and parents are always bad. That like Gen Xers can't let go of that kind of mindset, which is so instilled in them from that
That's
time.
right.
And that's why Gen Xers are so susceptible to all the dumbest political tropes of today, all the like trans brainwashing and all of this. It's totally that. And every Gen X musician totally went along with COVID fascism and masks and all of this, you know.
Whoa. Who went along with these with Gen X, Jack?
Every Gen X, all those Steve Albini, every musician from the '90s was the worst about COVID fascism.
Okay, give me some examples here.
Steve Albini.
Who's Steve Albini?
The producer of everything, of like Nirvana and Utero. You know, he was like an edgy, like transgressive guy back in the day, and now he's like a libtard COVID fascist.
You're giving an example of one person, and he was born in 1962, Jack.
All of them, okay, like all the Riot Girl. Wait, you failed to see a general libtardation among celebrities of a certain age?
Seems like to me most of them are. If you're talking about Neil Young and Neil Young, that is definitely not. That's Boomer.
Okay, well, Boomer Gen X cusp crossover. Regardless,
like, I don't see that. I don't see that among.
You don't see people like Beto O'Rourke. That's a great example of Gen X libtardation right there.
Okay, we call him Robbie Frankie. Yeah. Well, that's his name's Robert Francis. Yeah. Okay. Beto 1972. Okay, yes.
Okay, well,
Robbie Frankie. Yes, let's say that.
Getting back to violence. Okay, there's currently a total panic about sex and eroticized nudity in media. Eroticized female nudity has been effectively banned from mainstream movies for 20 years. It causes a panic whenever it happens, but everything is so full of meaningless, irreversible level, like head smashing violence, every single thing, and nobody has any kind of like emotional response to it. but anything sexual is viewed as really frightening and rapey and bad. And I've always liked violent movies, whatever, but I do think it is evidence of a weird, sick society when everything is violent Halloween horror all the time, and like Christmas is continually reduced to something called holiday, which is just like a red background purged of any reference to Christ or families or white people or whatever. It's just a general trend I've noticed is that everything is very Gen X, Tim Burton, whatever. Not to put too fine a point on it.
Yeah, I'm just that seems more boomer stuff to me. I don't know.
I mean, it's boomer too, but I generally find boomers are more innocent.
It's really hard to say though. I mean, it's the entire it's very interesting. Was there anything? I wonder if there's anything else we could notice about Buffy. The good versus evil thing. I mean, I don't know. It's a. I thought some of that was a show I think that had some really good villains though too. I mean, Spike was good as a villain. And it was often good sometimes when you see somebody who was good turn into the villain. Angelus was a great villain. Certainly Willow was good as evil Willow was good. It was a.
I loved Evil Willow. Sarah Michelle Gellar was a soap actress on All My Children.
Oh yes, she got Emmys for that. Yeah, she is a great actress.
She's great.
Yeah, I really she does not get the credit. I mean, I think the most amazing thing about Sarah is that when you could tell the difference between the Buffy bot and Sarah and real Buffy by sight, and then you could actually tell by sight when it was Buffy pretending to be the Buffy bot, and that was, and also when you had the body switch between Buffy and Faith. I mean, Sarah was so much more convincing as playing Faith than Eliza was as Buffy. And
yeah, that was great. The wonderful 90s sex pot Elijah, what's her name? Dushku.
Eliza Dushku, yes.
Eliza Dushku lost like tears in rain. Where is she today?
I don't know where she is. She was.
Yeah, she was great, and she was in also those like hillbilly horror movies that were pretty good.
Some of these, it's kind of funny, but the way Hollywood throws away these kids, they kind of throw away some of these young women too. They use them up in their 20s and then they never give them any work again. It's
that's changed a lot because everyone ruling Hollywood right now is like a woman in their like 50s and 60s. So I should go pretty soon. I'm getting.
Well, they've got to keep it politically correct. It's
well, and the star making machine doesn't work anymore. So all the stars that we see in movies today, they're all like really old and are from when the star making machine still worked. They're from like the late 2000s basically.
Yeah, and you see these resurrections of movies like you're bringing back Tom Cruise as Maverick and stuff like that. It's I don't know why, and I'm just kind of, it's like they can't make new Mavericks, so they can't really come up with anything originally.
They don't want to risk creating a new IP. I mean, I think that sometimes really good things can come from the remake mania. I think that it's best when the source material wasn't that good. So I think the Top Gun movie worked because the original Top Gun wasn't all that good. I thought the second one was better, and a lot of like remakes that are really inventive and different from the original thing, like the Luca Guadagnino Suspiria was amazing, because the original Suspiria, even though it's regarded as this classic, I've always hated it and thought it wasn't that good. But when you have kind of like shoddy source material that you just sort of draw inspiration from and turn it into something different, it can be really good.
It's kind of like how you try to make a TV series out of really popular movies, and the TV series don't do very well, but then you take a movie like Buffy the Vampire Slayer that was kind of a bomb, and you make that into a TV series.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Which is what they did, and it was maybe take something that wasn't that popular, but it's always a risk.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Well, since you got to go here, I was going to ask you. You got any opinions on Wes Anderson?
He is inextricably rooted to an embarrassing time for me. Like I will watch his movies when they come out. They're all like of a certain level of quality and usually pretty enjoyable.
Yeah.
But that style is just permanently for me rooted to early 2000s hipster twee, to the point where I find it kind of embarrassing. I do think he gets criticized too harshly, but I think generally the movies are good. I just don't have a particular like passion for them.
Yeah. And I should have also asked you, did you have an opinion on Mary Hartman?
Yes, Mary Hartman is one of my biggest inspirations. I've watched the entire show. Mary Hartman was, again, like lost like tears in rain because it's not streaming anywhere. Shout Factory released an amazing totemic box set of all like 325 whatever episodes.
Yes.
So you have to watch it on DVD. But it was like a late night kind of satire of daytime soap operas, but that's like that reduces it to, it was so avant-garde and strange and so completely politically incorrect.
Yes.
I mean, it's totally shocking. And Louise Lasser, who plays Mary Hartman, she was Woody Allen's first or second wife.
Yes.
But her like nervous, cracked out energy is incredible. It's like nothing else. If you like it, it's kind of in that kind of 70s mode of like Robert Altman, Nashville, and like Three Women. It's kind of adjacent to all of that for me.
Yeah. She was with Woody Allen back when Woody Allen was actually funny, and I suppose.
She was in like Bananas and
and Bananas, and then you've got Howard Cosell in Bananas, who's basically doing a parody of himself. It's so funny.
And one of the best characters on Mary Hartman is Dabney Coleman, who plays Merle Jeter, the mayor. And it's like Dabney Coleman is amazing in everything, but it's like his greatest performance. Yeah,
and he got stereotyped as always kind of playing the
asshole. Yeah. Mary Kay Place as the country singer. Incredible.
He was an asshole, but he was always kind of a harmless asshole.
Yeah.
But but he did well with that. But he was always great. And if you don't know, it's the show was actually called Mary Hartman, and it was a comedy, but it didn't have a laugh track, and it would play like a soap that you'd have these tight close-ups and all that stuff. It was which
really
actually
slow.
Kind of made it work. Yeah, it was very
really
slow.
Sexually perverted.
Yes, it was,
I mean, everyone is like a pervert, like the grandfather on it, and like traditionally on the soaps, the grandfather was always like the wise kind of like one who gives them all advice, and the grandfather on Mary Hartman was like the Fernwood Flasher and goes around like flashing elementary schoolers and like it's really slow, it's really repetitive. It's like nothing else on earth, and it was like a big hit for a moment, to the degree that they like merchandised it. There was a board game, there's a book. Mary Kay Place released records as her character Loretta Haggers. It's an amazing show.
And nobody really did anything after that show. Maybe
with the exception that was their greatest.
Maybe Martin Mull was about it, but Dabney Coleman too. But most of the actors on that show just kind of didn't really do much of anything else. It was.
Louise Lasser had a great role in Todd Solondz's Happiness in the late 90s, and Mary Kay Place is in everything. She's one of those character actors that has always just shown up as people's mom or grandmother in a million different movies.
Or she was in Private Benjamin too. She was kind of playing the stereotypical Southern girl, so to speak. Yeah, was a
Mm-hmm.
she was a There were a lot of good, and that's arguably definitely Norman Lear's most controversial series.
It's his most controversial, and it's far and away his best. I mean, like All in the Family and like Maude are good, but they're
Yeah,
so simple compared to that. Like All in the Family, especially being the most famous. I mean, eventually it just, when the kind of shock of how blunt they are with the racial stuff wears off, it's always a formula where Archie is wrong and bad, and the libtard thing voiced by Mike and Gloria is actually right, but it pretends to be kind of ambiguous about it. And Maude is great too, but it fizzles out where Maude starts out and she's, Archie Bunker's like liberal feminist cousin.
well,
And
actually,
she's
she was
like,
Edith's cousin, but yes,
or Edith's cousin, right?
yeah,
It starts out with strong parodies of that, but then the
yeah.
character kind of gets reduced, and it just goes on for a long time to where a lot of sitcoms end up, where they're just doing like variety show episodes. Where
Like, one thing about B is B was almost too big for TV. I mean, she was a stage actress, and I think she was still kind of bringing that stage actress chop. You got to be louder when you're on stage. You got to project more.
Yeah.
And some stage actors, they're too big for TV.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, she's a great actress, but it just kind of comes off, and people also say that people also say she was really good at celebrity roasts and stuff like that, which I could very much believe.
Yeah, she's incredible. I mean, she blazes on that screen with a mustache and a scarf. And Walter, the husband, Bill Macy, also really funny. There's like some shocking episodes where like Walter hits her and stuff like this. And
it seems like TV doesn't have the ability to go into those things anymore. It really doesn't deal with controversy.
No, it's too it's too subsumed to the list of social propaganda rules that it obeys to like explore nuanced characters.
And there was still some humanity. I mean, you got, I mean, Archie had his bigotry, but you still saw some humanity in Archie. I mean,
Archie is great. I mean, the show clearly had such popularity because you could also watch it sort of with the view that Archie is right about everything, which usually he is. But when it gets less good and more kind of rehearsed as the show goes on, they just have Archie like being a fool at all times, and Mike and Gloria are just parroting whatever the correct like libtard thing is.
It definitely goes that way. Archie. Well, okay. Well, it's been great having you on here, Jack.
Well, thanks so much. It was fun.
Where can we find you on the net? You've got your Jack the Perfume Nationalist.
My show is the Perfume Nationalist, and it's at patreon.com/Perfume Nationalist. There's also a lot of free episodes on Apple and Spotify to try out.
Cool. Yeah. Okay. Well, we had some video issues, so that's why we only went on audio, but. It was great having you on here, Jack. I knew you'd be a fun guest. Please like and subscribe. Follow the channel. Go buy my novel, Escape from the Village, and check out my Substack. I'm Chris Baker, and we're out.
All right.
Thanks. Bye-bye.
Thanks, man.